Today we're doing the power flow for the power of Vai. Power of Vai is a subjective perception power. It is directed, left brain, and it's closely related with Nai as far as being part of a person's worldview. A person's worldview is made up of what they know and what they're guessing, and the two together is kind of like your current map that you're going to go with. So Vai is a little easier to understand in this capacity in that it's the known part of that. It's the previously recorded data that your unconscious has, and to a lesser extent your conscious. So you have consciousness, what we call quasi-consciousness, when you're in between that and unconsciousness. And then we have what we call deep unconscious. When the power of Vai is used normally, it's related to things that you already know, and you may keep them in a short-term capacity. Does that make sense? But then you can also reach further into it, and it keeps giving you more, because your psyche has kept so much knowledge. It has recorded so much knowledge that your apparatus can only contain a small percentage of the vast amount of details that have been stored and that you know. So you know them, but you'd have to think about it a little bit. You'd have to pull away a little bit to get that. That's quasi-consciousness. And then you could really go in and have like a reverie, a deep going in, and you would kind of get more and more of that. But there's always more. It's a question of how much of the known you know. Does that make sense? So there's a stream of previously recorded data that you are currently not holding and may have never held. You may have recorded known things and you're holding it in what we'll call the like you have RAM, it's kind of the apparatus, and then you have the hard drive, disk space. So there's a lot of stuff that if the computer, the CPU, the psyche goes and looks for, it can get more and more of things it knows. Make sense? Okay. Yeah, good analogy for that is Nai is kind of like a computer's internet, and the Vai is like its hard drive. So everything that it currently knows is in the hard drive, and to some extent in the RAM. But the vast majority is actually in the hard drive, the unconscious. And then the internet. Again, a small portion of the internet stuff is in the RAM, but the vast percentage is untouched, unknown, and would be gotten to. But that is, in essence, all that makes up the understanding, the worldview of the CPU. All the hard drive recorded things and all the places it could go. Okay, so that concept of the known, it's important to understand the unknown because they explain each other in this way. As harmony is a kind of perfection, and perfection is a kind of harmony. With a worldview is basically what you know and the rest you have to guess. So you're standing at what you know and you're kind of reaching for your best guess, and that's where you're at. So what is known is all the stuff that if you were to hold it or to look at it would be something that you recognized as having come before. That's important. As opposed to Nai recognizing it in some sort of universal spirit form way. There's a recognition. So both these are perception in that when other activities are happening, they have recognition or non-recognition. And that's why they're very important. That's why they're left brain. Because they either recognize that in some fashion or they do not. So, like all the powers, it advocates for something. Being a perception power, it has what we call an innate state. These are the first two parts of the power flow, and they are what, as a state of being, they advocate for. They keep putting their hand up in the psyche and saying, we should be like this, or we should look at things like this. This is important. Some people have, to a more or less extent, this actually explains a lot of people's misunderstandings. All powers do. This one explains quite a few, a lot of ones that are very popular in culture, is remembering or not remembering. It starts with, did you or did you not remember? Before we get any further, it's the act of it. Did you do it? And it's important to understand that in the psyche, remembering is 1/8. That's important, but that changes different people. But that's actually a process, the process of remembering to remember. And that's the first one is recall / call to remember, remembering to remember. That's Vai's first job. It keeps saying we should remember. Whenever something is looked at with another power, touched another power, as it's doing it, Vai is always raising hands and saying, we should remember what relates to this. Okay. So to help you, this kind of relates to the attachment called Imagine of Nai. Both these, they tug. The same way these powers, when the environment comes in, they kind of get like a lift, like this. These do a pull. There's always a little tug of the subjective perception powers of, you should pay attention to this while you're doing these other things. There's some information that is relevant to that. Now you don't know what it is yet, but it's saying that there will be. There will be relevant information should you take a time out. So we call it attaching with Nai, we call it recalling, which is sort of like the psyche saying, dive in. It's a complete opposite of Nai. Nai is let go of all you know. Vai is dive in. Dive in, take a bath in what you know, and it will fill you with stuff that is relevant and important to whatever you're looking at. So, if that happens, what will come in is memory / experience. That's the second part. That is the waters themselves. So the waters have a call. They have a call to them. Come dive in us. We have stuff for you. And they do. When you dive in, Vai will give memories and past experience, and it will reunite a person with that moment. Because it's almost like a understanding that you had at some point, but you forgot it. Almost like another person had it. Does that make sense? Because you have so many memories, you can't hold on to them, so it's like it happened to these other people. But that information could be relevant to you. So when you swim in the waters, what happens, not like Nai, as they swim, it's raw. There's no discernment here, but the psyche will naturally make currents in the water that they're swimming in be the most relevant ones. So if they're touching a glass that's have a certain beverage in it, if they feel a tug, Vai, those who use Vai users, to remember, it's a call, remember, and they release into it. What will happen is memories usually very relevant somehow to this. Now it's raw in that it's pure perception, so it could be memories relating to the smell of the drink, the taste of the drink, the feel of it in the hand, the moment that you're drinking in. Something is reminding you of that. And it keeps shifting. You sip the drink, that's actually in real time, so it tastes bitter, but maybe this drink is only supposed to be a certain kind of bitter, or that's how they've been before. So this adds to your database of these kinds of drinks. Or it reaffirms that this is how the drinks are usually, because it tastes very similar to how you remember the drink tasting before. So either way, it's valuable information. Yes, this is how it's supposed to be. Or, interesting, they do it different here, or they've done it wrong. But it notes that. It notes that it's different. So when they are swimming in their stream, the fish that come up to them, so to speak, will tend to be stuff that they are relating to often with something else. So usually if you're tickling it with one of the other powers. This also happens with Nai, but it tends to be more random because since it's coming from universal primordial material, it seems like a random jukebox. But both of these powers are like an internal jukebox. Some of the power, or their stimulus power, does something and tickles them, and then a jukebox will begin to play material. The waters will start to well up with stuff. With Vai, which is why it's the known, what wells up from the stimulus tends to be highly relevant to what's going on. So there'll be a memory. So if you say a person's name to them, when you say that name to them, if the person has Vai, and higher up there is the motor field, there will be a call to remember what that name means. If they release into that call, then memories of that person, perhaps, or experiences and things like that will come in to give that name its meaning. Okay. As they come up, these fish, so to speak, in the pond to offer information, memories, usually relevant to whatever's going on, then there is a confirmation of it. It's similar to the synergy synthesizing of Nai, to where you were called to go to the stuff, then you got stuff, and then the stuff kind of shows itself to you, what it means. So for Nai, it's synergizing, synthesizing, it's now shown what it means, and therefore paradoxes are removed. With Vai, there will be a yes. There will be a memories coming in, and then, oh yeah, that's right, Bob gave me 6 things last Saturday, and then, yes. And the more that is done, just as paradoxes are removed, more exact memories, more accurate memories will come in. The memories will get more accurate. They'll start forming like a picture, and they'll get more accurate. More things will come out of the picture, like streams of information. And as they do, a picture builds, and it gets more accurate the more strands get filled in. So as you swim, strands of memories will come in, and they will build a more and more accurate picture. And because everything that's there is true. It did happen before, if you remember it correctly. And Vai does that, and the higher up in the psyche, the more powerful it is at doing that. So that's what it wants to do. That's kind of what it's doing all the time. No, that is what it's doing all the time. And like all the pod powers, it invites the rest of the psyche to do that. And it invites the rest of the world to do that. And it does so depending on its hierarchy, where it falls as far as its priority in the psyche. If you address it, if you say, okay, let's do that, what will happen? Okay, well, after being in these waters, when you come out of the waters, or you can even, if you are, for example, a Vai user, particularly one who is subjective, to where you're in the waters, you can literally be in the water looking out. When it happens, it gives you a point of view. So you can get it by being in the water, or you dip in the water and come out, and while those waters of memory are on you, you have this special point of view. Again, it relates to you are doing some activity, or you're having a class, or you're thinking some thought for school, you're using your Z, you're using your G for friends, whatever it is, but you're doing some activity, and the call to remember happens. So when it's addressed and you dive in, the memories come up, and you get verifiable data, it's going to be verifiable exact information about what? Most often about something that's stimulated. This is where it's very different than Nai. Nai will take the meaning of that and then go take some jump with it. It's going to come back with memories relevant directly to what stimulated the recall of those memories. This means that information tends to be, actually probably switch the order on that, it's the same entry, but specificity / practicality. You're going to have memories about that drink, or about those friends, or about that name, so the information tends to be highly specific. Because of that, it's the same entry, it's specific / practical. Because if you say a person's name, call to remember, they go in, the information they get, the memories will be about that person. So what they come back with is information about the person whose name you just said to them. That's going to be more than likely what? Practical information. You said something about Bob, they went in, Bob, blah, blah, blah. Yeah, last week Bob gave me 6 something before I came home. Not things about interesting information, that's highly practical. You mentioned someone's name, they went and thought about the person and came back with information about some knowledge they have on that thing. Does that make sense? Okay, so that's a point of view it has. That's an advantage. That's a special advantage it has. Whenever it goes in the psyche, it comes back with information directly related to what it went in for. So as far as being on target with its information, it is the strongest in the psyche. It is the most accurate as far as responding to anything that the social alchemy of the environment or its own other pod power brothers and sisters in there did. When it gets asked for something, it comes back with a lot of more information about what it was asked about or was thinking about. So it tends to be very specific and thus practical. Because of that, you can see the kind of flow here. The other pod powers, and thus other mojos, and thus social alchemy, and thus the entire world, will interpret Vai as being stable and secure. Because when asked for information, when Vai is asked for information, it will consistently go back and get verifiable information relevant usually to what you were talking about. Does that make sense? It will not take that and like its counter or its modulation knee, it won't take that and bounce somewhere with it. Where knee has the most of that, you give them something and then what they come back with is the most tangentially related of any of the pod powers. Vai is the least tangentially related. It is completely on point. And that's what it wants to do. And so therefore, not only is it doing that individually, which is a specificity and practicality, it does that each time. Each time it comes back with specific practical information. That makes it the stable, secure sibling. In our 8-sibling family here, that's its role. So, the first point of view is it'll be on point. Specificity, practicality. The next part is stability, security is you can count on it to do that. It will want to keep doing that. But the next part is, and this is another element, I want to make sure you understand the difference here. That last part was, it wants to do that and will consistently want to do that. But another element, and it's a true hallmark of Vai, and I want to give it its real credit here. Reliability / consistency, endurance. Nai and Vai both share in different ways. There's a phenomenal mental will to doing Vai. So not only will it come back with that kind of information, and each time you come to it, it would do that. You could come to it 24/7, and it will just stay like that until it pops. And the higher up it is, the longer it'll take. And if you're like a Vai Alpha, it just literally will not get tired. It will come back with specific practical information every time, and at every time will not break down. That's different. It's not just it goes there, it targets there every time. It can do that and not wobble. Over and over and over and over again. And the higher Vai is in the hierarchy, the more trained it is, the more insanely high levels of data processing can happen without there being any loss of the previous mentioned things. That's an important thing. So a fabulous amount of mental endurance to have stability and security, practicality, exact information, memories, and I can tell you this because Vai is my worst. The weaker Vai is, if you try and do it over time, even if you can get initially, the memories will start to wobble, similar to like you're doing math and you're doing basic arithmetic. It's not an issue that you can do it, right? But over time, your eyes get blurry and you start to remember 3 + 3 is 6 and 4 + 4 is, you're actually stuttering on stuff you actually can do. So Vai is very good at preventing that, on actually being able to, as long as you know it, you know it. You don't get tired of knowing what you know, and that sounds like obvious, but it's not. Actually, that's what Vai does in the psyche, and the rest of the powers get tired of knowing what they know and do other things. They do dynamics things, other perceptions, but Vai does not get tired of knowing that. I know that, and I know that, and I know that. And that's needed very much on certain things, because if you miss, then you fall down. And so when you would fall down if you missed a beat, Vai is your best friend, the psyche. That is what it does. It does not miss beats, even when pushed very hard. So a Vai user would appreciate this, especially a Vai Alpha. Not only, it's like a Glock, not only is the sight really good, very dead on, got a good sight, it's got a great reaction. That's like the stability security. When you pull that shot, it's just a good, clean recoil and it doesn't do anything weird to you. And you can put it in mud, you can fire it underwater. It just keeps shooting. And the one thing they brag about is 10,000 rounds, 100,000 rounds, 1 million rounds. There's all these records out there of how many times it's fired. And the sight, not only can it jam after a period of time, the sight will start to warp. The heat, the sheer heat of firing the gun over, they fire, reload, fire, and just keep firing the gun until something happens. Vai is like that for the sight. It keeps you from breaking down that way. It's like a metronome, very much like a metronome. It will not break down. So, very important when you need to look at things and not having that breakdown is essential to looking at it correctly. To look at data correctly and continuously looking at it correctly, accurately, or that would miss a beat and therefore be a flaw. Okay, so I mentioned it, flaw or something. What happens when it's doing this, when it's looking from that point of view? So it wants to go in and do these various things in the water, does that, comes out, now has a point of view. With that point of view, it's going to see things. What will seeing those things with that point of view cause it to want to do? And because of perception power, it's going to be movement. It's going to want to move, to pay attention most particularly. Change happens. It is a constant. For this reason, Vai is out of sync with that. As Nai is in his own way out of sync, and this again makes them left brain. Their perceptions that notice that the other things that are being perceived are different than this perception. They're rather unusual that way. They perceive that other perceptions are different. And so one of the main things they'll notice is change will happen to data that has just sort of begun to drift. And it notices that immediately. Faster than anywhere else in the site, similar to the way Zai notices when perfection as a principle for any kind of thing has been drifted from. This is not perfection. And this is why it's interesting, similar to Nai Alpha, Vai Alphas are not as directive as people think often when they meet them because they're hitting this power first. What Vai is noticing is difference. And it doesn't rate it yet. The rating comes from either G or Z, but the initial data is raw. But even the raw state, it notes with its perspective that that's different. Like, before they say, is it better or worse that this is a bitterer drink than they've had before of this kind of drink, the Vai will just notice that's different. And it will call attention to it. In fact, that's something that Vai considers to be its sacred duty, is when something different has happened, it's very much like Nai this way, very concerned about rituals. It's why the subjective perceivers, I've mentioned before, are very concerned about information in the world and how it is given out, who's in charge of it, things like that. Is that if you don't keep something the way it was previously, as I mentioned, it will drift off of that. And we have to decide, this is why they tend to be good at often crisis, things like this, management, if we should react and how we should react. But before we do that, and this is key, it is raw perception, the true perceivers here with the Vai, is what is it? And how do you know what it is? It's by variation, variance from the known. So, as a movement, it's going to go around and keep putting things where they should be or checking that they are still where they are. It's going to keep checking. We often say the Vai check. It's going to keep checking on them because if you don't, they probably have moved. It's true. Memories, if you don't check on them, get less distinct. Like you actively, this is true, if you actively think about memories through your whole life, certain ones, they will hold better than if you just didn't try to remember it. Do you mean? And Vai is very good at doing that. It naturally will keep memories very, very pure. It will maintain the fidelity of that. I will use the word purity because that kind of relates me over here like a compass. It's more like information, fidelity, kind of like when you transfer information from AV into DVD, into CD, and trying not to lose what was known. You had a certain amount of bits of information and you're trying not to lose them as you do anything else. But as information goes from G back to Xi, where it goes out here, back and forth, there's these constant opportunities for known data to fall off. All these pipelines, there's constant opportunities for that, for a porousness of information. And so as far as movement, it wants to go around all the pipelines it can and keep the information from falling out. It wants to maintain and preserve it as it is. Because once it's lost, like not, it's a worldview. How can you move? That was all the information you knew, all your best decisions and understanding would come from your best picture. So you have to keep as much information. Now, that information must be held certain places, right? Held in your Xi. It must be moved around. It must be moved around with your Z. It also must interact. It's got to mingle some with, for example, your knee. So Vi has to do that, but it doesn't want to have any loss of information, known information fidelity while it's happening. Because of this, when it goes these pipelines, other people shift pipelines, they jump pipelines, and so forth. Vi does not do this. It's the only power that doesn't do this at all. Similar to V, in the outward way, it does it in the internal way. It is completely sensory contiguous. There is no point where data just drops off on your Z and just reappears on your Xi. It may appear that way to your Xi or your Z or some other power, but it isn't true. Technically it's not true. You know what I mean? It is somewhere. Just like the paradoxes, there aren't really, you're just not seeing it enough. Being contiguous, that's one thing that Vi is very concerned about, is where everything came from and how else could you know where it's going? Because Vi is leery of guessing. Its antithesis is knee, and even on the worldview, it advocates as much as possible for knowing before speculating. That's what it advocates. So in order to do that, it wants to connect all the steps. So it knows this step to this step to this step, like history and tradition, I stand on that. And standing on that, I will reach. Doesn't like to jump. So it's the least jumpy, drifty, warpy of the powers, but it builds the highest, contiguous. It builds the largest masses, a peak. It is a perception power. They build the largest, highest, contiguous models from which to look from. And that's very important that the thing they're standing on be contiguous. There's no shakiness in the foundation. No point is there some of that Vi information that is sort of known. It's got to be known where you can't stand on it. That's very important. You have to know this Vi information to stand on this one, to stand this one, to reach. That's what it does. It's going to reach the rest of the way. But it wants to reach as little as possible. So in order to reach as little, you have to stack. Stack so you don't have to reach or jump. The roots are all the tradition that came before you, and that worked. You knew those things. There's a track record there, and so you stand on that for what is to come forward, whether it's in some sort of technical skill or a social, cultural thing. It doesn't matter, but it worked before. That's how it was done before. There's a precedent for that. Nigh, unprecedented. Vi, precedented. And that's where worldview comes from. Because when you're deciding how you're going to go, you basically go with precedents, and when there are no precedents, you do something unprecedented. That's what you do. And so that's what comes in sense of tradition. The sense of tradition is when they interact in the world with any of the powers they're using, they will attempt to do it as close to the remembered way. If they have to adjust, for example, all Vi users have knee. So if Vi is strong in them, then the Vi part of them is going to try and make it as close to exactly as it did before as possible, and adjust with their knee and with their nigh as little as needed to still perform the ritual, whether it's a technical professional or a social ritual, and keep it as close to fidelity as it was before. And so maybe you had to update buttons because the buttons that they had back then you can't get anymore. What's the closest thing? Does that make sense? Okay, we can't march down this street. What's the closest thing? What else would have a memory connection? Would there actually be a recall to, so when people did it, it helped them recall? Because that's what they want. They want what they're doing now to be a tradition, so when people do it, it helps them touch their vibe. That's what tradition does. It helps everyone who's doing it touch their vibe of that experience. So when you can't do it exactly like that, you do it as close to as you can. But you start with historic roots. I'm going to do it the way it came before because I had a successful record, and if I improve on that, it will be in what? The tradition of. So improvements, jumps, are considered to be from that. I come from bop, 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 and my place in this long journey, hopefully of excellence, is here. I add my noble length to it, and my length has a nobility to it. This is where Vai's understanding of heroicness is, because it's part of this long thing. So it sees itself as a small part of an ongoing, growing thing. And so it therefore gets its strength from that. I am the next ring of growth on this oak tree. And so I know where all the, you know, take an oak tree and you cut it, it's basically all these rings of growth layered up, not like a cartoon book where you flip the pages and it makes a video. It's the same thing. So each ring is like one sliver or input of Vi. And the whole thing actually makes up all the Vi that they know, but that lets them know what's going to come next. There's almost no guesswork, because I grew like this, and what grew behind me like this, then what comes here, it's almost foretold. It's almost pre-told what it's going to be. It's not prophesy, it's the exact opposite. It's like, it's obvious. It's obvious what the next thing will be, and that's a good thing in Vai's case. Because it notes all the exact numbers of things and the tradition and where things come from, it's very good at knowing how the numbers relate to one another. So Vi is going to know what the lowest number is and the highest number. It's important. It's raw. So if you have Vi first, your true perceiver. It doesn't necessarily say that's good or bad yet. It'll use the G or Z to do that. But what it will note is, in this instance, this thing got a blue rating. And in this instance, this thing got a red. So, are we trying to get red this season? Is red the goal of the company? Oh, then we should do a lot of this. It's very good at noting what, if you define for it in any way, or it self-defines what it needs to do. It's now, you're seeing how Nye comes out with Independence of Mind, secretive, it's meeting the world. This is Vi now about to meet the world. It's the 9th one. Because of this, when it's meeting the world, it's going to talk to it in that language, excellence. Because whenever you ask information, remember, it could start with what? It would immediately get something completely relevant. It would recall to something related to that. So when it comes out, a higher form of that, when it comes all the way to the end of its power flow, is it could have gotten many relevant things. And then it can get the most relevant ones, so that once you define what excellence is, they can go get more of it. That's basically long story short. So if we're looking for shining shoes, having shiny shoes is actually a sign of excellence. Vi can go in and find everything known about that, and then you can choose the best one because it'll show you all the known options. So whenever a choice is made, it's made with the best options. Yeah, because that's what Vi and Nye do. They give the psyche the best options, known options, and best guesses. So when the psyche's going to make moves, here you go. When you make those moves, you have this to look at. And what they're offering is everything. And the longer Vi works, the more it'll keep doing that. If they're trying to find out about something, some activity, some thing for a job, something for a relationship, once Vai starts doing it, inside, it will get more and more information. It will remember more information. That's important to consider. In this context, memories are nearly infinite. So, to the point of being like photographic and things like that, so if they keep going in more and more and more, they'll actually just keep getting more stuff. Likewise, when they come out, as they are out in the world, anything their psyche, this is what's known, has let them know that is important. They will consistently note all things good and bad, different and same while they're out in the environment. They won't necessarily rate them. Whatever powers prompting them to collect the data will rate it, but they'll collect data, kind of like, oh, we're doing a survey. It basically takes the point of view, Vai, that any activity that the pod powers are doing or the other modes or whatever is something we're doing. And once it's like, oh, that's what the company's doing, it will though gather more and more information, so there's more information to work from, so smarter decisions can be made. Because just like a scientific thing, if you get more data samples, then the results of that survey count more. And that's Vai's point of view, is it wants more of whatever would help make better decisions. So like Nai, it wants to help in that decision-making process, but it itself, and understand this, does not make decisions. It collects information to make decisions and advocates for continuing to stay in contact with that information, so that when making a decision, that information is given a very high priority. Does that make sense? It doesn't necessarily say if it's good or bad. The Z or G may do that, but it'll say, make sure you pay attention to the Vai. And if you get 10 reams of information from it, while it hands you that, it'll say, come back, I've got 20 more. And it'll keep saying that. Are you working on this case? Then it'll just keep wanting to give you more information, and it never thinks you have enough. Like all powers, it wants to keep doing what it does. Its case, like Nai, is it's an internal information feed, and it basically keeps coming out like an ambassador to the rest of psyche saying, you should listen to this, you should hear this, because you're making decisions with information that's not either current, up-to-date, accurate, or whatever. So make sure you have that before making any moves. Make sure it's accurate. Make sure it's accurate and enough. Make sure you have enough accurate information before you do anything, and that way you will be the most excellent. Because in Vai's opinion, it's not wrong, in a lot of ways. Lack of excellence comes from not knowing what you're doing. You know what I mean? For example, let's say you thought you're doing good because you're doing an activity 1 through 100. That's cool. But you could have been doing 1 to 1,000. But you weren't. It's only because 1 to 1,000 would take more effort and it's irrelevant. But with more information coming in from newspapers over this country, it turns out that other institutions similar to what you're working on, they have their first-year students doing 1 to 1,000. We're behind. We didn't know that. Does it make sense? That's what Vai advocate. Now, Z or G may now say, oh, holy shit, that puts us here in ranking, we had to move. But what caused that was the raw information from newspapers, for example, or from a stock portfolio comes out. And now, that can be accounted for in all the calculations, and it couldn't before. And so until then, it's incomplete. And since Vai always have more, it takes the point of view that your information is always incomplete, so you should get as much as you can up to the very last second. Yeah. And after you do anything, collect as much information about that so in the future you can remember it. This comes down to an overall theme, a keystone of certainty. And that's because, as you've seen through all those powers that lead to this, there is a being called to by something you know. So it's not like, what is this? That's different for Nai. They both call, but when Nai calls, the person, the apparatus goes, what's calling me? You don't feel that with Vai. So start at the beginning of it, there's a, even when it's tickling you, you kind of know why you're being tickled. All the way down, it is consistent, it is stable, as you mentioned, it's contiguous. It matches without often things outside. This is where it's very different than Nai, is although it's different, for example, what it knows and other people know, it is known. So if you're around situations, institutions, social alchemies, bubbles that have that, then the Vai will not notice much disconnection as say Nai would. So it's reason it gives a great sense of being grounded and certain, Because why should you shake? What reason is there to shake? I know I got called. When I went in there, I got kind of what I thought I was going to get, but more. And it connected step by step. There's no drops in it. And now I'm here. So why should I be uncertain of why I'm here? I have the most information and there's no gaps. So that's its position. And it does have that. It's very sure what it knows. And if it's accurate, it may miss a big picture, say what 9 might get, but it isn't, if it's done correctly, Vi is never wrong on the information it knows. It just may not have enough information so that when more information was unfolded, the whole tapestry or picture may have looked different. But the individual pieces, if Vi is strong and done correctly, those are all correct. Every individual piece that connects that information is yes, 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 that's all known. And so you can stand on that because even the big picture changes how an angle looks. It is what it is as far as that context. That never changes. Like if you remember that your parents did something on a fishing trip 20 years ago, okay? That may change relevance as you learn more facts about their past life you didn't know. It may color that Vi point, but if that Vi point was accurate, if it was transmitted to you correctly and then you remembered it correctly, that never became wrong. You mean the context may change, but Vi always has this. It's a raw data point. If done correctly, it is absolutely accurate. And so you have to, and this is stance, you'll have to paint around me. And it does. If it's true, Nai and Ni will paint around Vi, as the rest of Psyche will. If Vi is accurate, that is simply known. It is. It's a fact. You have to make sure it's a true fact, because if Vi is not correct, you can think it's a fact. But still, just like Nai's like, I know it. Well, I thought I knew it. but still, both of them give a great sense of sureness. But one is sort of like you're in a current and you're being pulled forward, like a jet ski style. That's like Nai. So the current, you're being pulled along, but it's something in front is pulling you. With Vi, same thing. You're in a current and you're basically being pushed out in front. From behind, something's actually generating. That's like the history, the sense of the historic roots and sense of history, of tradition and so forth. And so there's both a sureness because they're moving very fast down this direction and you know that's the way they need to go. But there's that sureness takes on a certainty quality because what is causing the forward movement with Vi is known. You can look behind and see the engines or whatever is actually causing you to go forward. The distinct signal that those with Vi have and those who are Vi Alpha give it off constantly is a way to detect them with the 5 years, third year. The distinct signals we call being concerned, also prepared, checking. And that's the signals giving out. You can give it a word that means more to you, but that is the energy. It is a concern that others, and by others this is deep, the other pod powers. It is a concern that the other people out here, the other pod powers in the own psyche of Vi, and the conscious part of the Vi itself, the unconscious pure Vi, is concerned that they have forgotten. So that's what starts the call to remember. The unconscious Vi thinks the conscious Vi has forgotten. And the conscious Vi thinks the other pod powers have forgotten. And certainly thinks that everyone else has forgotten. So that's concern. And so it keeps checking, and then that concern is alleviated, like the deep anger is when it turns out that that's not needed or there's something that can be done with it. But it comes back right again. It never goes away because there's always something that could have been forgotten. You could have forgotten something in a millisecond, and milliseconds are happening 24/7. They're happening not only in your mind, they're happening in your friends and in books and everything else. There's always this, something that Nai's concerned about for a different reason, disinformation. Disinformation that comes from incorrect memory and not allowing you to continue. So there's a concern about that. There's a concern there will be a loss of fidelity if that's not checked on constantly. And therefore, Vai will always have that energy emanating from it, and those who have it high in their psyche, it'll emanate and pervade over the others, because all the pod powers have that distinct constant signal. But with Vai, if it's high up, that will be one that permeates over the others, is a sense of concern about having forgotten the way things are.